One of the great truths of Christianity, particularly to someone living in the first century in a Greco-Roman world, was the idea that through faith in Jesus Christ, all of us have equal status before God. It didn't matter any longer whether you were Jew or Gentile. You are now one new family in Jesus Christ. The hostility that existed between those two has now been removed through faith, and now you are one new man. The differences in the socioeconomic class system that existed, which was ironclad in the first century, between a distinct difference between a slave owner and a slave in society. Now, these two members of society had equal access to God, equal value, potential of equal inheritance before God, which previously did not exist. And in their current lives, they did not experience in their culture. Well, how do these truths translate when you are living in an environment where there are biblical and societal structures of authority? Between a husband and a wife, between a parent and a child, between a slave owner and a slave in that first century context. Well, Paul addresses this beginning in chapter 5 and verse 22 when he begins with the most intimate of human relationships between a husband and a wife. A husband who would have the biblically ordained role of the head of the household should no longer view his wife as a result as someone who is inferior due to the fact that she has a lesser inheritance or less rights. In fact, now that they have equal access to God, he should protect that environment and cultivate an environment in which she thrives. You see, that's God's intention for the husband, and as the head of the household, he has the responsibility of loving his wife, according to Paul, as Christ loved the church. Christ gave himself up for the church. He sacrificed himself for the church. Christ set aside the church. He sanctified her and set his affections on her by nourishing and cherishing her. This is the example for husbands to do the same for his wife in this new environment of recognizing our equal status before God, that we are to set her apart as the object of our affections, that we are to nourish her. And this idea of nourishment isn't just a one meal idea. So it doesn't work for husbands to think they're accomplishing it when they do something special for Valentine's Day or for an anniversary. It's this environment that we are cultivating of nourishment that provides an environment where she thrives as a woman, as a fellow believer in Christ, and as a co-heir in Christ. And he cherishes her, that she would feel loved and valued in that relationship. This is revolutionary to that first century audience that Paul is addressing. And it should be the norm for every single believer. A husband and a wife should coexist in these biblical roles that God has ordained way back in Genesis chapter 2, that we should create an environment with one another, recognizing the roles that we have, the husband as the head of the household and the wife as a helpmate to the husband as we work together, valuing one another, being made in the image of God, and now through faith in Christ have an equal status with God. How do we interact? We interact as Christ does with the church. A tall order. Yet, Christ gives us the ability to, by setting an example for us, by giving us his Spirit, regenerating us that we might see one another as God sees us. And we would act toward one another as Christ has acted toward the church. I really want to encourage you to listen to this last Sunday's message if you haven't heard it already, because we spent a considerable amount of time explaining these things as Paul writes them in Ephesians chapter 5, verses 22 through 33. This next upcoming Sunday, Pastor Logan is going to give the message beginning in chapter 6 and verse 1. So read ahead, and so you can be prepared in your heart and your mind for this upcoming week's message. And we'll be praying for you this week, and we'll see you this Sunday at 10:30.